Okay, so I wanted to start with this tribute to Eric Sanderson because I've loved this image since I came to Manhattan and since he published this book, because it shows via time lapse the change from biological diversity to social diversity, and it implies our charge in integrating these together. As landscape architects, we must be leaders in bringing together these two worlds, which are sometimes seen as separate, but which are in fact intrinsically intertwined. And as Rebecca Solnit has said, environmental problems are cultural problems, and vice versa. So I want to talk today about small projects. Rebecca has done great work in her large park. Most of us, and I've kept to Charles's rules, so I can't show any of my larger work that is not in New York. I'm showing our New York projects, and so they're small, but they're what most of us do every day, and I'm incredibly proud of them. But I also want to show them to you through the lens of our thinking about what it is we're doing in the world. A lot of the discussion in the first chapter. So what do they look like? How do they function? Are they contributing as much as they could to the climate change? So the first is West Harlem Piers Park. This was our first project in New York City about 20 years ago. It's located on the Hudson. We worked with the community to engage the waterfront and reclaim it for public life. This was an equity project that the community had been working on for 30 years, bringing waterfront access and amenities that were being implemented to the south on the Hudson shores up to Harlem. In this before and after aerial, you can see how we related the piers and other park structures to the geometries of the neighborhood. This created increased pedestrian access under the rail and railroads to the park. We also diversified the landscape, changing this parking lot into 3 major habitats: the woodland, the pier, and the cove. In doing this, we rebalanced the streets, creating space for bicycles and pedestrians. We added piers to link the land and water and expand the park area, not in old historical patterns, but in new water-based patterns. The cove was a place to foster engagement, including WEAC's Green Movie Night. And the woodland was a quieter place to enjoy the waterfront. So we brought increased biological diversity and provided amenities to increase cultural diversity. Our work checked all the right boxes, and indeed, this is a successful and well-used park that I'm very proud of. However, as I look at it today through the lens we're discussing, is this sustainable in the face of climate change? Does it react like Rebecca was mentioning? This in 50 years, it probably will be replanted, or, it's basically a garden. So in thinking about this further, we did think about the one other element that we had added to the park, which was in the river. As a part of the mitigation for the new piers, we added 50 reef balls to the river, each with 500 square feet of surface area, the first such project in the city. Since that time, oysters and fish have increased dramatically. The river landscape is growing and evolving in a way that the land side is not. The river life is increasingly diverse and sustainable. So how can we bring this dynamism into our upland landscapes? So the next project, in working on the edge in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, a few years later, we similarly used local geometries to define the plan. We improved access to the river and pedestrianized streets, created a variety of piers, and renewed the waterfront. We created a diversity of habitats, sometimes over structures, as shown in this section, some upland, some along the shore's edge. And this is where we realized there was some potential to bring a sort of living shoreline into the project. Due to a bit of benign neglect by the overstressed Parks Department, who was maintaining the project, the riprap shore began to develop on its own, over time sprouting volunteer trees and shrubs. This led us to the idea of multiple management structures within one even small project. We have noticed that this strategy is also being employed in other projects, like right here at the High Line, where they have recently let go a lawn to give nature agency. Promoting multiple management strategies in our projects as landscape architects will help make for more dynamic and sustainable landscapes. These management structures need to be integral to the design. We all need to include dynamic changing landscapes in our designs and educate our clients and the public on the advantages of these messy landscapes. Maintenance is a scope item, back to the slashing all those common phases. It's a scope item we need to add if we want to have a more sustainable place. Another lesson we learned at the Edge was an idea which came from the dead-end streets. As we worked on more waterfronts in New York City, and as we noticed how common this condition was, we developed a project called Marine Streets to deal with this condition. Marine streets collect and filter stormwater and help to mitigate storm surges from the river. We published this idea in an article in Restoration Ecology in 2011 and also circulated it to various government offices. This same long-term thinking led us to the idea of forest streets in 2018 as we realized the increasing effects of heat island and the need for carbon sink, pollution control, and so many other benefits that trees can provide, which also Martha spoke quite a bit about. With temperatures rising, the inequity of their absence in so many locations in the city is becoming increasingly obvious. Trees, and more importantly forests, the more complete ecosystem which provides increased sustainability, should be a necessary element as we replan streets post-COVID, along with cafes and other cultural spaces. We need to bring biodiversity into the cultural diversity balance. This leads to the last project I want to review, our Hudson Street streetscape in Hudson Square, where we tried on a small scale to bring this idea of diverse woodlands into a regular street, building on Signy's good master plan. This was the typical condition on Hudson Street, and our project was to create an identity for Hudson Square. Our design idea moves from a single street tree to a more layered woodland. The resulting design also provides social seating, cafes, deliveries, and bicycles, as well as a more diverse canopy and understory, building on the existing street trees. The design provides a healthier underground for the plants to thrive as well through increased permeability and larger soil area. New York City has approximately 22% tree cover currently, and there are organizations in the city working to improve and extend this. New York City Parks, through its Natural Areas Conservancy, has created a forest management framework for the existing forests in the New York City parks. They estimate it will cost $385 million over 25 years to maintain these 7,300 acres and improve their health. The Nature Conservancy just came out with an urban forest agenda for New York City, and I think it was this year, and proposes to extend the forest cover to 30% by 2035. We can all help them make this target. So my message is that small-scale projects can bring about large-scale change through the application of systemic thinking as we plan our streets and infrastructure for the future. But to have the most impact, how can we improve this larger framework as we work to make our incremental landscapes more meaningful? New Yorkers should be able to understand where they live so that when storms come, it is not a surprise that a former wetland area floods, as Eric Sanderson recently pointed out in a New York Times article. The undifferentiated grid of Manhattan hides local ecologies still latent in the geology, hydrology, and other site systems. This ecology should be woven into the zoning code and other regulations, not only to preserve our existing forests, but to create new visual awareness by the community and new performative systems, which gives nature agency in our public spaces and more closely reflects the dynamic ecologies in which we live. Why not start with a system of marine streets, forest streets, and wetland streets appropriate to the location? And most importantly to me, I really worry about the next generation. Many people and children don't get out of the city to see other landscapes, as discovered in this recent study. And if they can't experience the differences in these places and understand how they work together, how can they engage and learn about the world we live in? We need to weave a diverse and dynamic nature into the fabric of our cities. We need to give it agency and let it evolve as we continue to face the challenges of tomorrow. Small steps. Can't even read my last line. Anyway, I think you get the idea. Thank you very much.